Good evening. Welcome to Main Point, New Holland. We're having a pretty good evening out here so far. There's a lot of sharing and caring, but we always welcome you guys to come out. It's awesome to watch it on YouTube or online, but there's nothing like being here to be able to share with people who actually care about each other. Tonight, for a speaker, we have Gary Sensenig, my cousin. I know him since he was probably 12 years old, I think. So if you don't mind, Gary, come on up. I'll introduce you. You can, yeah. So this is my cousin Gary. Like I said, I've known him since probably known him well since he's about 12 years old or so. I had the privilege of watching him grow, watching him chase after his dreams, and I'll have to say, I don't think I've ever met somebody that at 12 or 14 years old, somewhere in there already knew exactly what he wanted to be and drove it until he became what he was after. But I know there's been some struggles along the way and it didn't always go well, so I'm looking forward to hearing Gary's story about his life. May I pray for you before you start?
Absolutely.
Father God, we just thank you so much for Gary being here, for his willingness to share, just talk about what you have done in his life, how you've guided him, how you've brought him to where you want him, the struggle that he's gone through, and just the faith that he has in you. Father God, just bless him as he shares in Jesus' name. Amen. It's all you, whatever's on your heart.
Thank you. All right, well, good evening, gentlemen. I'm honored that anybody would be interested in hearing my story, but I guess the more I think about it, it's not really my story entirely, but it's God's story, what he's done in my life. I'm a little outside of my comfort zone, so I'm glad it's a small group of guys.
I told you it wouldn't be many.
You did, that's true. Yeah, it's true.
And nobody looks mean.
We're loud and obnoxious.
Yeah, right. But like Dave said, my name is Gary Sensenig. I live right here in New Holland with my wife Krista and my two boys, Rhett and Elliot. My story starts, and it's continuing right here in Lancaster County. I grew up 10 minutes from here, over towards Red Run, and I'm one of 8 siblings. I'm right in the middle. I have two older sisters, one older brother, and I have 3 younger sisters and 1 younger brother. And the family that I grew up in was conservative Wheeling Conference Mennonites. And when I look back on my childhood, I really don't have negative memories of growing up. Everything was positive. My parents did a fantastic job of raising us with the best that they could. I grew up on a 5-acre property with a creek in the back and a pond out front, so it was pretty much anything that a boy could ask for, really. And so for me, literally as far back as I can remember, I've always had a profound interest in emergency services. And from literally, like I said, as far back as I can remember, I've always wanted to be a police officer. But growing up Mennonite and being a police officer, if anybody knows about the Mennonite culture, they're juxtaposed. You can't do that. The way the Mennonites believe, they believe of the foundational doctrine of non-resistance, that you can't carry a gun, you can't be ever put in a position to ever take somebody's life, regardless of the situation. That's never right. And the Mennonite Church, they don't even allow their members to be part of the military, to be police officers, or really government in general. And so I always kind of squelched that dream because I'm Mennonite and I don't think that that's ever going to happen for me. And so instead of, I've kind of refocused my dream towards EMS because that was something that I could do as a Mennonite kid growing up. And so being raised Mennonite, I attended a Mennonite parochial school up until 9th grade. And then when I graduated from school, from 9th grade, my dad was a businessman. He had multiple businesses, and so I went to work for him, initially doing seamless spouting and gutters, and then his businesses were like home improvements, windows, doors, siding, things like that, and then also egress window wells and Velcro doors. And that's even though Dave and I are cousins, we come from that side of the family is very large, and so we don't even I have cousins that I don't even know. There's 16 siblings on that side of the family, and so there's like 98 cousins, and so I didn't really know Dave that well, even though we were cousins, until we started working together. But like I said, so once I'm out of school, I started focusing on EMS because that was a dream that was achievable for me. And so when I was 16, I went to EMT school at Everett Hospital, and I graduated from EMT school when I was about 17. And immediately I started working, or volunteering, I should say, at New Holland Ambulance across the street. And I chose New Holland because a couple of reasons, but I didn't live in New Holland, but Dad's business that I worked for was in New Holland, so I could run ambulance from work. And I could, one guy that worked there with at my dad's business, his name was Dave Malt. And he was not only was CEMT, but he was also, and worked for my dad, but he was also a member of the church where I was, the member of the church that I was a part of. And so he's an absolute legend in this area. He volunteered in the Holland Ambulance actively volunteered for over 40 years. And so he was one way that I got connected at New Holland, and also my uncle Glenn Sensenig was at EMT at New Holland for, I don't know, the better part of 30 years. And so those two helped me get my foot in the door after EMT school. And man, I loved it. It was, I couldn't get enough. Like it was everything I thought it was going to be and more, and I loved every minute of it. So about shortly thereafter, when I was at early teens, I started running around with the Mennonite youth group. Shortly thereafter, met my girlfriend, now wife Krista, where we started dating, and as we part of the youth group, just dating, and still running the ambulance at New Holland. But when she's 2 years younger than I was, so when she was 18, I was 20, just before we kind of reached that age. We were discussing marriage, and she had said about that she wants to take basically a year. She wants to do some mission work. She wants to do just stuff with her girlfriends before we would get married. And so I needed to find something for a year. Basically, we didn't take a break from our relationship, but we'd agreed that we would see each other less through that time. And so it had been about 3 years since I was an EMT, and I was hungry for something else. And I think that was my desire to be a police officer kind of coming up again, but again, I'm still Mennonite. And so I decided that I was going to look at paramedic school. And I realized pretty quickly that I needed a high school diploma to be a paramedic. And so the nice thing about paramedic school is it's exactly a year. So it was exactly the time frame that I needed to fill up and to busy myself with. And so I quickly found online a place I could take a GED. I scheduled it. I showed up one day, didn't study a bit. I winged the test, and I passed. I'm sure it wasn't with flying colors, but I got the certification I needed and my ticket to medic school. And so I applied, and I was accepted. And so I started paramedic school in January of 2010. And this time I was 20 years old. And what I just glanced over a little bit that I failed to mention, when I was 18, I got baptized. I joined the church. I didn't really have in my life a radical conversion moment. We grew up going to church, and Jesus was part of our family my whole life. But I joined the church, I got baptized about 18 years. But anyway, fast forward to medical school. 2010, start medical school, and it was academically the most challenging thing I've ever done. It was. I mean, you think about being a paramedic, and you have to know a little bit about everything, because anytime somebody picks up that phone and calls 911, they need you to fix a problem, regardless of what it is. And trust me, you can't cover every scenario in school. But during medical school, I felt like I'm just getting waterboarded with information. Like the instructors are just pouring information down my throat, and I am struggling to just keep my head above the water and survive and learn. But anybody who's been to medical school will say the exact same thing. It's a year of torture, of just trying to absorb as much information as you can. And then part of school is that you have to precept. You have to do hours of time in the ER, hours of time as a paramedic student on a paramedic truck, working under another medic, hours in the respiratory unit, hours with the cardiac cath lab. You have to do hours at the OBGYN floor, hours with respiratory slide on psych unit. You have to. It's intense for a year. But I graduated on my 21st birthday, actually, 2010. And I was never more proud and probably really full of myself when I got those 9 orange paramedic letters on my shoulder. And the thing about EMS and about first responders in general is you see a lot of awful things. But it didn't really deter me at all. In EMS, you kind of refer to some calls as good calls. They're not, Garden Spot Village, grandma's sick at 3 a.m. and she wants to go to the hospital. But you get these good calls that really aren't very good, but they're very traumatic. I've seen stuff that most people, would probably vomit if they've had to deal with or see. My youngest suicide, for example, was a 12-year-old boy who shot himself in the head after being bullied at school. I've been on like toddlers run over by farm equipment. You name it, I've seen it pretty much. But I loved it and I enjoyed it very, very much. And I still do. I'm still a paramedic. I'm still doing that. Started working at Manheim Township Ambulance as a paramedic. And then I started working at also Uffolk Community Hospital, which changed names a couple of times. It's now WellSpan EMS. I'm still technically employed. I feel like God's closing that door for me. I haven't worked a shift there in quite a while. But I want to talk about 2 calls that I was on that really shaped my view of God. And the calls at the time weren't necessarily all that, they were traumatic, sure, but they weren't, at the time, I didn't really think that much of them. But both the calls, I was working the medic unit here right in town, right in New Holland. And the first call was on the south side of town, actually more towards Intercourse. And it was for a pediatric drowning. And what had happened there was I think it was 3 or 4-year-old boy. The family had an above ground pool, swimming pool in the backyard. They had a retractable safety ladder, but he had managed to defeat that ladder and pull himself up and fell in the pool and drowned. And luckily for him, his neighbor was an EMT, so that as soon as an 911 call came out, the neighbor ran over, started CPR on him. And I was working with, that day, I had a very good friend of mine was with me. He was in the paramedic school, so he was precepting as a student under me. And even though he was a student, he was probably more competent as a provider than some of the people that I was working with. So I trusted him fully. And so we were going to this call at high rates of speed. And anytime you get a critical incident like that, or critical call, if you have 2 providers, you always divide and conquer. One provider is going to go for the airway, keep this person alive, breathe, intubate them. The other provider is going to do IV medications and cardiac monitoring. And so I looked at my student and I asked him, I was like, do you want the airway or do you want the monitor? And he, of course, chose the airway because pediatric intubations are hard to come by, especially as a student, but even as a paramedic in general. But we got there, we attacked that kid from both sides, and everything went like clockwork. I mean, you could not have asked for it to go any smoother. It was just one thing after the next fell into place, and within 2 minutes, we had this kid was breathing, had pulses back, he had a strong heart rate, he had good blood pressure, and I'm thinking to myself, man, we just saved this kid's life. And if I'm being completely honest, I could probably see in my head already the accolades and the awards that I'm going to get for this. And but I called Lancaster General Hospital, talked to the doctor there. He said, don't even bring the kid here, call a helicopter, fly him to Hershey. And that's what we did. And within about 2 hours, we found out that the kid had died. He got to Hershey, and he was clinically brain dead. And so the parents made the choice to take him off life support. And so at the time, it's hard. It's a hard thing. But it wasn't that difficult at the time. But fast forward about 2 years, and I'm again working in New Holland, and I'm by myself this time, and another call almost 2 miles apart, same area, south of New Holland. And the call was for it came in as a pediatric cardiac arrest, meaning there's a kid that's not breathing. And when I went responding, the dispatch center says, hey, this is a I don't remember his age, 3 or 4 year old kid who was backed over by the vehicle. He stopped breathing. And yeah, thank you. And I apologize. When I'm nervous, I tend to talk really fast. So if I start running my words together, you let me know. But anyway, this is for a call for a kid who got backed over by a vehicle. And so what ends up happening at this call is it's a moving day for the family. And mom was going to go move a vehicle. And she had done actually a walk around the vehicle like she should, confirmed it was clear, gets in the vehicle, goes to leave, and she didn't see her son, who was, again, 3 or 4 years old at the time, running out to go with her. And so she backs over him. Lengthwise, starting at his feet, back tires of the vehicle go up over his legs, up over his pelvis, up over his stomach, up on his chest, and she stops just shy of crushing his head because the other kids are screaming, they see what's happening, and so she stops, she gets out of her vehicle, sees her kid, gets back in her vehicle and drives off of him. And when I say a vehicle, this was like a 2000s model Suburban, so it's like crazy heavy, like a little tank on wheels. And so I rushed down there, of course, and when I got there, the Gordonville ambulance was already there, and they had the kid in the back of the ambulance. And I pulled in, and what I saw when I pulled in was, it's hard for me to describe, it's something that I haven't seen really. And that was the family was all out in the front yard, and they're all crying, and they're praying, and they're asking God to save their baby. I've never been able to tell a story without getting emotional.
That's fine, that's what it's about. Just let it out, man. That's what we're doing. You got this.
Excuse me, sorry. So I get in the back of the ambulance, and this kid is not doing well at all. He's, what I would say, in and out of consciousness. He's covered in what we would call, what medically would be called petechiae, which is ruptured blood vessels from all the pressure. And so we start doing what we got to do. And when I talk about the first call, how everything went right and everything fell into place, this was the complete opposite. Everything that we tried to do was just an absolute wreck. And I had called for a helicopter early on to fly this kid. And the flight crew gets there, these guys are the best, they're the best of the best, and they get there, they can't do anything either. We can't get him intubated, he's got a lot of swelling and pressure, and yeah, everything, it was just a train wreck. At one point, the dad had asked if he can come in the back of the ambulance. And the EMTs had told him no, and they looked at me because I'm in charge. And they're like, hey, Dad wants to come in the back. And I was like, bring him in. Like, I don't think this kid's going to live. Bring him in. And, you know, because I'm thinking now, by this point in my life, I have my own son. And that's what makes it even harder. And so I'm thinking to myself, man, if this is my son, and you're going to keep me out of the ambulance, you're going to have a problem. And so he comes in the back, and he's praying. Like, he's just crying out. He's begging God to save his boy. And the flight crew, they fight with this kid's airway, trying to get him intubated for the better part of 20 minutes, and that's an eternity in the back of the ambulance. And they can't get it. They eventually just give up. We load him in the helicopter, and they fly him to Hershey as fast as they can go. And after they had left, we're in the back of the ambulance kind of cleaning up. And I stepped out of the ambulance, and I run face to face with Mom. And I was like, man, she wants an update, and I tell her, I'm sorry, things don't look good for your son. She had family. I said to her, hurry up and get to Hershey as quick as you can. And so, from what I'm told, when they got to Hershey, they had, of course, the army of people waiting, and it took the pediatric, the anesthesiologist, it took him 40 minutes to get this kid intubated because of just all the swelling and pressure. So, yeah, and so now, as sure as I'm standing here, That kid was discharged from the hospital 3 days later. Couldn't find a thing wrong with him. And I know, without a question, that's a miracle.
Mhm.
There's no other way there's no other explanation for it. And even the Dr. Hershey said the same thing. And so, when I look back on those calls, and it really helped me to understand that God is sovereign over everything. And no matter what I do as a paramedic, what anybody does, I was naive and foolish enough to think that I held the keys from life and death, and that's not the case at all. I just do the best job that I can do, and the rest is really up to God. And so I'm thankful that we serve a God who's sovereign over everything, including life and death. And I'm thankful that we serve a God who does not make mistakes. And so my timeline, the timeline's a little bit overlapping, but it's just easier for me to kind of break it down into segments. But in September of 2011, my wife and I were married. We bought a house in New Holland, and I was still volunteering at New Holland Ambulance. And all along, I still had this desire to be a police officer. I just couldn't explain it. It's something I wanted to do, and my time at EMS made it worse because I got to work around cops and just be around them, and it made it worse. But my wife and I are still conservative Mennonite, and she knew about it all along. Even when we were dating, she knew I wanted to do this, and she knew it's something that I was kind of had this desire. But again, it was just kind of this desire that I squelched. But after we were married, I began to look into it a little more. Let me put that on pause for 1 second. Right after we got married in 2011, in 2012, my dad's businesses, he was facing financial ruin. A lot of things were factored into that. But he had to sell everything that he had, all of his businesses, everything. He had to sell everything to get himself out of debt. And so at that time, I was managing the egress window well portion of the business. And so my dad, when he sold everything, I bought a portion of that business. I just bought the window well section, the egress window well section, and I created my own business called Better Basement Solutions. And I had that business for 3 years, and it was successful. Like I grew the company. But it just wasn't fulfilling for me. I knew there was more out there. So now my wife and I'm really starting to look into this thing with being a police officer, and I am asking people for some advice, and I'm talking to different people, and I believe then, and I believe now, if you look at Romans, that God appoints people into positions of authority. Not everybody is deserving of that authority, maybe not deserving, but maybe they don't always use it appropriately. But I believe that God appoints people, and so I had to ask myself, if God appoints people, how does he do it? If God calls people to do things, how does he do it? So I began to look into that a bit, and of course you have, God can audibly speak to people like he did Paul. You have that through dreams, but what I discovered is that God speaks to you through the Holy Spirit speaks to you through that still small voice inside of you. And I began to come to the understanding and the realization that this internal desire that I have to be a police officer, I began to realize that I believe that to be God's calling on my life. And so I talked to other people, and I wanted to take a brief moment just to acknowledge Dave, because you're probably the first person who called that out of me and who affirmed that. And every time we would be driving anywhere, I'm like 15 years old, every time we'd see a cop, I was like, I want to do that. And he'd be like, and you would always say, you should, you'd be good at it. I think you should. And
I knew 12, 13 that was your dream.
Yeah. As long as I can remember. So my wife and I decided that we're going to go for it. I'm going to go for it. So we break the news to our families, which wasn't all that great. But they initially were not very accepting at all, but later they've come around. I was told by some folks that I was risking my salvation, and they believe that God calls people to be police officers, but not you. But not you. And I said, well, I don't know that I can limit God like that, but I feel pretty strongly about this. And so I decided, my wife and I decided that we're going to do it. I'm going to go. I'm going to go to the police academy. If God opens doors for me, I'm going to take that as a sign that I'm doing the right thing. And he did. I could tell stories all night. Well, not all night, but I could tell a lot of stories. But one of the big ways that God opened the door was that when I went to the police academy in 2014, back then it was pretty hard to get a job. It was harder to get a job, I should say. And so most police departments would not even look at you or hire you unless you had the training already that was required. Very few, like the big cities, would hire you and as an employee pay you during the police academy, but for the majority, they wanted you to have the training. And so in my academy class, there was, I think, 34 cadets, if I remember right. And of that 34, there was 7, I think, that had jobs, and all the rest of us were just there by ourselves, and we were paying for ourselves to be there, paying to get this training, and hoping that we get a job. And out of all those cadets that did not have a job, I was the first one to get offered a job. That was one way that I saw God opening doors for me. Initially, it was a part-time job initially, but it was still a job, and that led ultimately to a full-time job, and that was down at East Earl Township Police Department. And so, in order for me to go to the police academy, in order for me to financially do it, since it's a Monday through Friday thing, I had to sell my business, and Dave Sensenig bought my business. He's been running it ever since. But so I went to the academy in 2014, graduated. My first shift as a police officer was New Year's Eve, 2014 into January 1st, 2015. That was my first shift. So initially part-time, and that ultimately culminates into a full-time position within like 2 years. And so I loved it. I had, it was everything that I ever dreamed and more. And it was, of course, like with any job, it certainly has its moments. But really, I very much enjoyed it. And since then, I've had multiple people, affirm that what I believe was God's calling. I've had multiple people affirm that and speak that over me. I've had East Earl is a very small department. Anytime I go to training and we're with the Lancaster City guys or the Reading guys, and they laugh and they say nothing happens in East Earl. And I said, well, that's not true.
Houses blow up.
Right, that's not true. I've had just some crazy things, some tremendous, some crazy opportunities. I had the opportunity to go to the Lancaster County Drug Task Force for a period of, it would have been longer, but it ended up only being 6 months. It's a long story in and of itself. But while I was at the Drug Task Force, I worked on many cases, but I had one case of my own while I was there in that 6 months. And that case there, we took a street-level drug user who wanted to work off some charges for her boyfriend. So she offers information for a guy in Lancaster who's selling fentanyl, heroin. And so we do some controlled buys with her. We ultimately get a search warrant for his house. He ends up a very small amount, only like 100 and some bags, not much. And as soon as we get him, he says he'll flip. He'll flip on his guy from Philly. And you learn very quickly that people will promise you the world and not be able to deliver. And he says, I can get you 10,000 bags from Philly. And I was like, dude, no way. And I had my training officer, the guy who'd been there for years, and he's like, oh, nah. And he goes, no, I promise. And of course, then it's, how much money do we have to put up for this? Oh, none, they'll bring it up. Well, he was right, they did. And so he had his guys from Philly come up, and we got him with 10,000 bags of fentanyl. And so we took literally a street-level drug user, we rolled that snowball up until we got 10,000 bags, which is for this area, a big pinch. I had, after Coming back from the drug task force, I was involved in an officer-involved shooting. I'm not going to really talk about that too much. That's less than 5% of police officers on the job are involved in officer-involved shootings. So I had that happen to me. The short version is basically the guy tried to kill me by running over me, and a couple other officers. And so yeah, that happened. And it would be crazy to say that but that's really not the craziest call that I've had as a police officer. And I'll tell you that story. I don't want to tell too many war stories, but I had a call down in Blue Ball for stabbing. And we had known this house quite a bit. We'd been there quite a bit. Boyfriend, girlfriend are always fighting. They have 4 kids under the age of 4 with them in the house, so it's just not a good situation. We had been there quite a bit. And we got a call for a stabbing, and every call that we had been to in the past was ridiculous. Like, it was just them arguing. It was very minor, and I'm thinking to myself, yeah, stabbing, I don't think so. This guy's gonna have a scratch or something ridiculous. That's probably what it's gonna be. I was right down the street when that call came in, so I arrived within seconds as the dispatcher's still giving us information, and as I'm pulling up, she's saying, oh, by the way, there's a guy collapsed in the driveway that's unconscious. And I'm like, oh, okay, this is getting serious. And so I pull in, and I see the guy in the driveway who is, not looking well. And I see the girlfriend, the girl I knew from the house, standing in the driveway covered in blood. And I see the guy I know from the house going into the apartment and shutting the door. And so I get out, I run up to the guy on the ground who is gurgling and bubbling from places he shouldn't gurgle and bubble from. And I was like, he's still conscious, but barely. I was like, what happened? What happened? And he's like, yeah. I said, who did this? And he identifies the guy that I saw go into the apartment. And I look at her, and I'm like, who did this? And she says who it is. And I'm like, he's inside, right? And she's like, yeah. And I ask him, like, your kids are in there too, right? And she's like, yeah. So I run over to the door. This is the thing about when people laugh about nothing happening in East Earl. When stuff happens in East Earl, you're by yourself. Here I am by myself. I have help coming, but they're like 5 minutes out, 3 minutes out for sure. I run over to the door's locked, covered in blood. So I draw my gun, step back, boot the door in, and there's kids. The oldest kid is 4, but so 4 and under. There's blood spatter on some of them. They're screaming. I don't see him anywhere. So I start calling his name. The apartment's laid out kind of weird. I start calling out his name. I'm like, yo, get out here. And he comes out of the bathroom, and I wasn't quite prepared for what I saw. He comes out of the bathroom, and I wish I would have brought my pocket knife, but I don't have it. But he had his pocket knife. He comes out of the bathroom, and it's buried up to the hilt, right like this, in his neck. And I'm looking at him, and he's looking at me, and I'm like, what am I going to do now? Like, I have to get this guy into custody, but like the slightest move of his neck, like, I'm like, my mind's racing, and he's looking at me, and I'm looking at him, and finally I'm like, dude, just get on the ground. I'm like, just get on your knees. And okay, he listens. And so now I'm like, what? I'm still trying to figure out what I'm going to do. Like, kids are screaming. I'm like, dude, like, this is the battle between the police officer and the paramedic. Like, I know this guy needs treatment, and I'm like, but I have to get him into custody because he just tried to kill somebody. Maybe he did kill somebody by now. I don't know if the guy's still alive. And we're looking at each other, and I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to do. Now, the story, I've slowed it down. This happened in a matter of like 15 seconds. But he's looking at me, I'm looking at him. He just slowly reaches up, grabs a knife, and yanks it out. And I was waiting for blood to cross the room, and it didn't even bleed. So I'm looking at him, and he's looking at me, and he just slowly takes the knife and turns it around and stabs himself in the stomach. And I was like, I'll pull it out of your fat gut, but I ain't gonna pull it out of your throat. So I take a couple steps in, I grab it, I yank it out, I push him over, and I cuff him up. And basically what ended up happening is the boyfriend and the girlfriend get into an argument out in the parking lot of the house. He tells her that he's gonna kill her. He's done with this stuff. He's gonna kill her. And he grabs her in a chokehold, and he takes his knife, and holds it up to her throat and tells her he's going to kill her. And she's squirmed a little bit, and somehow they tripped, and they fall into the driveway. She falls onto her back. He gets on top of her and straddling her, has his knife out. He tells her that he's going to kill her, and he takes the knife and he slashes it at her throat. And her arms are pinned, and she's laying there, and her only defense is to take her chin and go like this. And the knife rips across her chin. Probably would have cut her throat had she not done that. It cuts across her chin, and of course that's why she's covered in blood. The other guy, who was a friend, was inside. He comes out to smoke and sees this. She's covered in blood, he got a knife, and so he jumps in like anybody should do. And that's when the boyfriend turns on him and just starts stabbing him over and over and over. And the girlfriend runs back to the house. Of course, the boyfriend's interest is her, so he follows. The guy who stabbed runs over to the neighbors, calls, and is trying to make his way back and collapses in the driveway. But so I ended up charging the boyfriend with 2 counts of attempted murder and aggravated assault. He pled guilty and he was sentenced to, like, I think it was 30 years. After coming back from the drug task force, our department is very small. It's only 6 guys. So we don't have a detective yet. I would say that we need one. We have a pretty big caseload, but we don't have one as of now. And so when I came back from the drug task force, my chief assigned me to investigate all of our department's sex crimes and child abuse crimes and then internet crimes against children, which is like child pornography. And so I've been doing that since 2019. And as weird as it sounds, I love it. You don't find any truer victim than a kid that's been taken advantage of by an adult. And so I've had some really some crazy cases with that, but I very much enjoy it. And dare I say, maybe this isn't my calling, but it's something that I found interesting and enjoy doing. I had one big case that, I've had a bunch of cases, but one real big one that we had an internet tip for child pornography. A cyber tip was generated for this guy's house. And he had disseminated child pornography. We got a search warrant for his house, and then we hit his house. And we bring him back to the police station. He sees all of his electronics. We bring him back, and he interviews, and he spills his guts. He tells us everything. And what we learned, and what the investigation showed I worked this case for months, is that he had taken a kid from Gap, a random kid from Gap. He took all of his pictures on his Facebook account, saved them all, and was posing himself as this kid, as a 16-year-old boy, when in reality he's a 40-year-old man who was over 400 pounds and living with his mom in a trailer. And he was posing himself online as a 16-year-old boy, and he was targeting girls from the age of about 11 to 16. And he would get them to send him images and pictures and videos, and then he would save them on his phone. And when we interviewed him, one step in the process is you try and get them to quantify how much child pornography they have. And he's like, "Oh, it's a lot." I said, "Well, that's a subjective term. You know, if I have 1 or 2 pictures, that's a lot on my phone, but you might have a lot more." And he says, "Well, I can't even put a number on it." I said, "Well, try." He said, "Well, I'll put it to you this way. I could scroll through this for the rest of my life and never look at the same thing twice." And he probably wasn't far off. We got his Dropbox account by search warrant. It took me 12 hours to download the whole thing off of Dropbox. In the Dropbox account, it had 43,000 files, and every file is an image or video. So ultimately, the feds got a hold of that guy. We charged him at a state level with like 80-some felonies, but then the feds got a hold of him because these girls that he was targeting, identified girls all over the country, California, Oregon, all over. And the feds got involved because of that, and they charged him federally just, I think, 2 years ago. I'm not 100% sure on that, but he pled guilty and was sentenced to 35 years federally. So that was a big case that I had, a bunch of other cases. What has always intrigued me or fascinated with me, I should say, about this job is how hard it is for people to admit when they just made a mistake. Like, the people you would not believe, like the guy I just told you about, who has everything to lose, the people that you wouldn't think would be completely honest with you, like the people that you don't expect will. And the next guy will lie and deny and he's got, looking at the most minor crime. Like, I've had guys on video stealing from like JB's ornaments. That's not me. Are you serious? Like, yeah, it is. Nah, that's not me. All right, man. Like, well, whatever. But it's always fascinating with how hard it is for people to admit when they've just made a mistake. I mean, I've had 2 cases recently that these were Christian men who had gotten into some trouble and gotten arrested and charged, and both of them have lied and just slandered and just accused me of fabricating evidence, accused me of stuff you expect from drug dealers. Yeah, you expect to be accused of stuff, but the one guy was a Mennonite pastor, and he's accusing me of fabricating evidence and just doing all this crazy stuff, when all he would have to do is just, yeah, you know what, I did make a mistake. So that's always something that has fascinated me. I didn't talk too much about my family. I have 2 boys, Rhett and Elliot. Rhett is 9 years old, Elliot is 6. Absolute pride of my life. Shortly after we were married, and actually while we were dating, my wife had told me that she expressed interest in adoption and foster care. And I was like, man, with my job, I see all the bad stuff. I don't know, like, if this is for me. But God slowly worked on my heart in that area, and my wife and I decided that we were going to try a private adoption. And we had looked at an agency. We were in the process of signing up, and man, we couldn't sleep. Like, it just was not right. Like, adoptions are insanely expensive, private adoptions. You're looking at like 40 grand minimum, and they'll help you raise money, but it's like, I just didn't feel good about it, and it just was not right. So the day before that we were supposed to sign up, I called the lady up and I said, we're pulling out. Was just not sitting well with us. And so we began looking at other options and looked at foster care. And we decided, hey, why not? Let's do foster care. So we did some training, we got signed up with a county agency, and we got, within a short amount of time, we had a placement. And we got a 3-month-old boy who was at Hershey Medical Center. He had been he had been shaken by his father. And he had 2 brain bleeds, he had a torn retina, a couple other things. My wife went up to Hershey and picked him up. At 3 months old, we brought him back, and we pretty much fell in love like right away. And our caseworker told us, this is an adoption case. Like, there's no way this kid's gonna go back. And you just gotta go through the motions. I'm like, okay, all right, great. And I'm like, man, like, this is crazy. This must be what God had for us. You know, we wanted to adopt. We signed up for foster care. Here we go. This is going to work out great. And so we have this kid. So by law, you have to have a child for 15 months before they can terminate parental rights, right, and put them up for adoption. So we were encroaching on our 15-month mark. And our caseworker told us, yep, we have the paperwork ready to go to terminate parent mom's rights. This will, before long, you guys will be adopting. Like, it's a done deal. On the Friday, when our 15-month mark was up, on a Friday, our caseworker told us we're going to hold the paperwork till Monday just to make sure we're not close to the 15-month mark. We want to make sure we give them a couple extra days. That Friday, the children and youth froze all terminations and adoptions. They were in the middle of a lawsuit, and they froze the adoption and termination process because they had to revamp how they were going to do it. So it was closed for a few weeks, and when it went to reopen, our caseworker told us, well, in that time frame, mom started to work on her plan, and now we can't terminate her rights because she's showing what they call progress. And from that point on, we gradually saw that he was going to be returned. It's hard for me. Yeah, we saw that he's going to be returned. Ultimately, he was after 772 days. he went back to his mom, who he didn't really even know. He called us mom and dad. And we had him from when he was 3 months old till he was two and a half. It's hard for me to put into words. The heartache of that. For me, it was my family. How do you provide answers to your boys who prayed every night that he would stay? People who have been through it really liken it to the death of a child. I don't know. In a death, you know that your child is, gone to be with Jesus. In this, you don't know. You don't know if they're safe. You don't know. What I didn't know at the time is that God had a better plan. And not every foster story ends like this, but in the months after he went back, his mom was gracious enough to let us continue to see him. And she continually spoke to my wife and I, saying how grateful she was that we raised her baby, and how grateful she said, I can clearly tell that you guys loved him well because he loves you guys, and and so she's permitted us to be part of his life. And now it's turning into this, it's morphed into this beautiful picture of my wife really walking alongside of his mom, and just being there for her and supporting her. He was at my house a week ago for overnight. We still get to be a part of his life. And now we can see that that's where he needed to be. At the time, no, not so much. But now we can see that he's in a good place with his mom. So we're incredibly thankful. We have friends who've had children for over a year, and they'd go back to horrible situations, and it's awful, but it's just part of it. I always get amused by people who tell me that, I couldn't do foster care. No, that wouldn't be for me. Like I would get too attached. And my response to that is, every kid deserves somebody who's going to be too attached to them, and it's hard. There's no other way about it. But God is gracious, and He gives you grace for. I got too attached, but somehow here I am. I've made it through, and since then we've had another kid came to our home for just a short amount of time, and now I have just about a month and a half ago, I believe, we got 2 baby girls. One came at 6 weeks old, and her sister was 14 months old. And man, talk about rocking my world. Like, I mean, I hadn't been a girl dad ever before, and now we got pink everything, and it's been really, really good. I mean, we didn't know what we were missing out on by not having any girls. And these lunatics in society who say that there's no difference and we let the kid decide, that's craziness, because this girl is just all about shoes, and there's so much difference, and it's been awesome. So we don't know what their story is going to be. We don't know how long we're going to have them. It could be a month, it could be 2 years. We don't know. We just kind of take one day at a time.
What's different with girls, you got to get ready for that. The other night, like, he was painting Remy and Addie's fingernails.
Yeah.
And after a while, my hand was out on the chair. Remy painted my fingernails blue the whole way to my knuckles. Yeah, she was so proud.
Oh, man. Yeah. Well, that's where I was going to end for tonight. You guys have been gracious. You've listened to me blab for an hour. I'd be happy to answer some questions. And I'd talk to Dave maybe after the live stream's cut. I might talk just a bit more.
What's up?
Thank you, Gary. I knew you had an incredible story. I know I knew some of it. Yeah, just knowing you over the years, I knew you had your struggles and things like that. But something that always stood out to me watching you and watching you grow was I knew that desire to be a police officer, that was in your heart from the time I knew you were probably 12 years old. And I know we talked about it often, and yeah, I used to tell you that if God has put this in you, then it's for you to figure out and chase after. Don't quelch that. But yeah, thank you so much for sharing. Thank all you guys for joining us online.
Next week.
Next week, JD's house.
Correct.
Yeah.
I'm just making clear to everybody that we will not be at Citygate.
So we will not be at Citygate next week.
Frank will make a post with my address.
Okay.
I just don't want it online
Yeah.
and you know,
So
people
Frank
watching
will-
on YouTube
Yeah,
show
Frank
up
will-
at my house.
Frank will make a poster saying, and then yeah, we're gonna have a barbecue
He knows where my
or
house
JD's
is.
house. So yeah, or Jonathan's house. That's what we'll be doing next Friday. Just a time to get together, maybe spend a little time in prayer, but just to eat some good food, talk to each other, just get to know each other, and build relationships. Anyway, thank you all for joining us. Feel free to stop out anytime. 117 East Main Street, New Holland. We start at 6 o'clock. Normally people are here. We eat food at 6:30. Time of time of worship up until 8, and then we go live with the speakers. Feel free to stop out and check it out, meet some new friends. God bless you all. Have a good night.